Okay, welcome to the drawing board. My name is Min, and this is a live drawing session, and I'm gonna talk about drawing flowers today. Well, painting flowers. Last time we talked about drawing flowers, and this time I'm gonna get into doing some painting with watercolor. So let me show you what we're gonna work on today. I'm gonna do something kind of like this. If you follow along, I sort of painted flowers last time, and I sketched it out using pencil, and today we're going to add some color like this. And what you will be needing today is some sort of brushes, just regular old brushes would do. If you're using traditional brushes, I usually go 3 sizes: a small, medium, and a large. You need some kind of water container, preferably with two containers, one for clean water, one for dirty water. Or you could do what I do and just use one of these kind of water brushes that has like a little container, has water inside. You can see the little air bubble. And you'll need some kind of paint. Using a little palette like this, and I'm going with watercolor, but you could pretty much use whatever kind of paint you want. You will also want to have some paper towels for cleaning off your brushes. A extra blank piece of paper would be helpful for a little bit of what I'm doing. So that is about it. So I'm gonna get started. I'm gonna switch to my other camera. So this is what I'm gonna try and do. Last time we worked on how to draw it, and I already kind of sketched it out. If you haven't seen the video, you could go back and check that one out first and then come back to watching this one. But you could kind of see how I've had it sketched out pretty lightly on here. And also I taped up the paper to this board because when you start using watercolor, the paper kind of warps, and this will kind of keep it a little bit tight and also leave a nice white border at the end. Alright, so what I'm gonna first do is lay down a light wash, and I'm gonna look for let's go with a light blue color, and let me have my paper towels as well. So when we first lay down a wash, we want to get it fairly wet and just a little bit of color. So I'm kind of wetting. I'm gonna wet the entire sky here. Even though we're focusing on flowers, I want to have a little bit something in the background, so it's not just plain flowers. And I'm just gonna lay down a little bit of a wash here. One of the questions that a lot of students have is how do you paint white when you have watercolor? Because watercolor is kind of transparent, and when you're painting white, it's hard to get that. If you need to paint over something, like if you have white in the foreground, you have a darker color in the background. So the obvious thing you can do is you could just leave the background. You can just leave the gap where it's white. So I'm painting a blue sky here, but I have like a little bit of white clouds in the background. And so, I could either just carefully paint around it, or the other thing you can do is, this is part of the reason why I suggest having a piece of paper, because what I could do here now with this piece of paper is I could just rip it, and you could try to kind of give it shape like clouds. But just give it kind of any type of pattern would be okay. So this would kind of work for what I'm doing. Let me just make some slight adjustments here. If you make a long, fast rip, you'll get more of a straighter line, and that's going to help me make these kind of windswept clouds that I'm trying to make here. So I'm just going to cover it up. If you want, you could be very careful and deliberate about ripping it to exactly the shape of the clouds that you want, but I just kind of roughly mask it off. And ideally you should be using watercolor paper, which I'm not. I'm actually using Bristol here, but I'm not going to get too detailed about that because you know, whatever you have will work, especially since we're in lockdown. You may not be able to get all the supplies that you need. And then what I could do is also I could flip it over and use the straight edge here to give it a nice sharp bottom part so the clouds look like it's really windswept. And I could go back and fine tune it a little bit. I like this type of clouds where, you know, you can see the path that it takes. And here, I can fine tune it a little bit, give it some more texture, some more shape. So this bottom row of clouds, it's going to look a little bit different than the ones on the top. And again, I'm going to use the bottom here to get a nice sharp line. Here you can see where the beginning of the rose is, so I'm going to carefully paint around it. And I just use the brush to kind of mop up some extra color from here and then bring it over onto this side here. A little bit of a bleed under the paper here. You could be a little more careful about it and make sure it doesn't do that. Well, here's one of the things about using Bristol as well as the watercolor paper. You'll see that the paper tends to rip a little bit faster. Again, I'm just gonna drag the paint down, even out the skies a little bit. And if it's too much is coming off, just dab it dry. The other thing you can do is if you know you went over a little bit of lines here, you can just add more water and use water to kind of erase your mistakes. If you do it too much though, the paper will start to tear. So do the minimal. And also with the sky here, you know, I want the darkest part to be where I put the most paint. So I want the corners to be the darkest. Just like when you're looking at photos, sometimes there's this vignetting effect, and that's usually a flaw in the lens, but that's what creates some dark corners, and is a look that I am somewhat partial to. So I start in the corner and I drag my brush down, and as I drag it down, it's gonna dry out a little bit and have less color as I go. So same thing on this side here. Okay, and I'm gonna find another color. And we're gonna basically have 3 layers to the background here. We're gonna have a background layer, which is the sky. We'll have a midground, which is these kind of rolling hills. I'll make it kind of this yellowish brown color, kind of like our hills around this time of the year because it's all dried up. And actually, I should be doing this upside down. I'm gonna start here. Kind of didn't do that very well, so let me clean off my brush. Add some more water and just kind of erase this here by adding more water. The reason I don't want to do that differently is because, you know, I remember when I started with the darkest color here. Now I'm going to start with the darkest color along here. And because I want the hills to sort of meet and fade into the sky, so I want the darkest part of it here. And then as it gets further into the distance, it's going to kind of fade out. Oops, got a little too much yellow there, but that's okay. What happens is, when things are at a distance, you're looking at it through more atmosphere, and it tends to be a little bit softer, and the color starts to kind of blend together. So I'm going to kind of blend these colors together where they meet. And then the hills in the foreground, I'm going to go with even slightly darker shade here. Let me see if I can find the right color. I'm going to make it a little bit greener. So I'll mix this color and then a little bit of this green here. Let's see what color it looks like. I often just dab on the side of the paper as well to get the right color. Yeah, this will do. Maybe a little bit more green. And again, I like that dark vignetting effect, so I'm going to start from the corners here. And I'll make this pretty wet, because right now, again, we're just laying down a wash, so we want this to just be barely on there. We could go back and add more color if we need to. But the point of this is to just get a little bit of background color, make sure all the part of the pages are filled with something. The colors here are not quite matching as well as I hope, so, you know, we'll just erase. Some people like to wet the entire paper first and then just dab on some color. I'm gonna refrain from doing that just because I'm not exactly working with watercolor paper here. I'm making it fairly wet, but at the same time I'm not like dousing the paper either. It's okay if it goes over a little bit. For most parts, we're going to be painting over it with darker colors, except for the sunflower here. The sunflower is going to actually be a lighter yellow. Maybe I'll make it a little more green on this side so that the sunflower stands out. But yeah, we're just giving it a little bit of color right now. And because it's the foreground, I'm actually okay with, the foreground tends to be a little bit more vivid, so I'm okay with actually coming back here and highlighting this line here, this edge where the two mountains kind of intersect. I want a well-defined line right here, so that's why I'm gonna go back and fine-tune this line here. And if we want, we could give it more color. But I think for the most part, this is sufficient for now. I don't want to spend too much time on the background. It's just there so that the flowers are not sitting in front of a white, boring background. Okay, so now I'm gonna find the red for the rose. And also clean your brush often. I don't do it nearly often enough, especially if you're going from a darker color to a lighter color. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to basically go through and lightly go through with the outline and fill that in. Again, this is just my way of doing things, not necessarily the best way, but this kind of works for me. The lighter you can do this, the better. I'm afraid if I go too light though, I might not show my camera, so this is probably heavier than I would have liked. And just a recap too on how to draw the flower. What happens is I do a little spiral, and then from the spiral I draw each of the petals, and it spirals out. That's how it works for a rose. Now, particularly the outside here, this is where you need to be really light, because it's going to kind of fade in there, or fade out into the background. Here, we're going to fill it up, and it doesn't matter so much. Okay, so now that I've got that outline, I could load up my brush with a lot more paint, and I'm going to start from the inside where I want it to be the darkest. And basically, if the flower petal is shaped like this, I want to fill in this part here, the inside part, and leave the outside blank for now. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm basically going back on each petal and filling in this part. Sometimes the petals are kind of folded over like this, in which case I'm kind of filling it like this. So that's what's happening with this petal here. The reason I'm doing this is because the deeper in, like the ones here, the deeper in they are, the darker it gets, right? It's hard to see because less light is reaching the inside there. This is another one of those petals that are folded over. So I'm just gonna go horizontally across like that. Again, this one here, there's a fold right along here. Now this is the outside of a petal. So this one here is like the outside, like this. And in this case, I'm gonna go and fill this part out here. If you don't do it perfectly, it's fine because we could go back over it again later. And you know, if it's a funky shape like here, I'm just gonna follow those contours and give it that funky shape. Okay. Alright, that's a pretty good start. Now that I have it filled in, I'm not gonna go back and get more paint. I'm actually gonna get a little bit of water, so I'm gonna squeeze this a little bit. If you're using the traditional brushes, you just want to dip it in a little bit with water. And the reason why is because now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take these and I'm just gonna drag the paint out, right? Because it's gonna fade out as it comes closer to the light. That's too much. This is why you want to keep paper towels nearby. Too much water, dab it dry. And if you want, you can also start thinking about, you know, where you want your light to be coming from. If I want to come in from the left side here, I might want to leave a little bit of white highlight along the left side as well. So yeah, let's do that. Let's leave a little bit of white highlight on the left side. And we can fill the right side all the way to the edge. The other thing you could do too is if you don't like having to leave a certain bit of your drawing white, or if you just can't quite get your lines that well, you could just get some other kind of paint, some non-transparent paint like gouache, and fill the white afterwards. Yeah, gouache or even acrylic is fine too. I mean, if you don't mind mixing mediums. I often go through when I'm coloring stuff, is just give it one solid color for whatever color that particular item is supposed to be, and then I go back and add shadows and highlights, and you'll see me adding shadows in a little bit. But for now, I'm just kind of pulling the existing color I have out. I'm mostly just, I'm not putting on too much paint, I'm just adding more water and dragging it out. Again, I'm leaving this little white outline right here. Depending on, you know, where you say the light is coming from, it could be a little bit more towards the back of the flower, or it could be straight on the side, or more towards the front. I'm gonna say it's kind of coming from the back. So if it's coming from the back, this part here is a little more white, and then I'm gonna have this part fill in a little more red. And the watercolor always comes out a little bit lighter, so even though I'm using a fairly solid red color here, it's gonna come out a little pink. If you want it to be red, like a dark, deep red, you might want to mix in a little bit of brown. Let's see. Again, I almost dipped in a little more paint just out of habit, but I had to kind of resist and pull back and just drag the colors out here. So this is better than if we were just kind of went in and just color everything solid red, because now it has a little bit of depth. You can see, whereas towards the middle it gets a little bit deeper and darker red. Now in fact I'm actually going to go through and add a little brown like I suggested earlier. Particularly like, okay, this petal overlaps this one, so I'm gonna have a little bit of shadow underneath the particular petal here. And let's see where else. This right here will be a little bit darker. Also this one right here is gonna cast a little bit of shadow over this one. And also right where it gets deep in here, I'm also going to make this a little bit darker as well, because this side of the flower is not getting as much light. And you just kind of go back and fiddle with it. If you want it darker, dip in a little more paint, a little less water. If you went overboard and you gave it too much color, you could add more water and just kind of wash it out. Right in here, since we're making this side the darker side, I'm going to go back. And also the tip of the brush is going to be where you get the sharpest line. So I want the tip on this side here. So again, let's see if I can do better with this one. There we go. Too dark, so I'm going to wash that out a little bit. So I could go on and do this for quite a while, fine-tuning everything. But I'm gonna say this is almost done here. At least it's done enough to a point where you get the idea. You could go back and fine-tune it. Let me see if I could just fade out this a little bit as well as here. A little bit darker on this side. So we're about half an hour in. This particular lesson is going to be a little bit longer than usual, just because got a little more to deal with. I try to keep it under an hour. Okay, so that's more or less the rose. We're going to give it a stem as well, so let's go through and find a nice dark green. Part of the reason I color to feel yellowish brown is because I want the stem to show up. And you'll see what I'm doing here is I'm just giving it a solid green for now. And usually right where the flower petal meets the vine, there's a few, I don't know what you call these, but there's a few leaves that kind of come out right there. And it's good to also have like a leaf here. And when you draw these leaves, utilize the shape of the brush, Don't just, try to outline it like you're drawing it with a pen. Really use that pointy tip of the brush to give it the shape. And play around with different brushes, see which ones you like. I'm only using one brush this is basically my travel set, so it's nice to use one brush for this, but if you have multiple brushes, see how the different shapes work. Okay, so I have the base color, that green, but I might want to make it give it a little bit depth, so I might go back and add a little bit of shadows to one side, with the leaf too. A lot of times I'm actually rotating the paper as I draw. It's a little less convenient to do that while I'm doing it live because there's things in the way. But you can see, especially right down the center of the leaf, you might want to give it, because it kind of folds over and you want to give it that texture so it looks like it's kind of popping out of there. And even this bulbous part, give it a little bit of texture there. I'm going to draw another Rosebud really quickly, and this one is not going to be open, so it's going to be a lot faster and easier. I just want to show a different kind. So again, I'm going to, when they're more of a bud, you see a much pronounced round part right underneath the petals, and from there you just have a stem, and then you have more of these greenish leaves popping out like this. The way this one is done is way more systematic, following each line. I know that's not everyone's style, and some people would like to not have to think so much when they're drawing and just want it to be fun. So this is the more liberating method. Just quickly brush on a few lines here. Again, you can still utilize the shape of the brush. Okay, so that'll be the stem. And let me go back to the red. Again, I'm changing color, so I want to remember to clean off my brush. If you're using traditional brushes, dip it in the dirty container and then dip it again in the clean container. For this one, I just squeeze and wipe. Let me see if I'm getting touch your colors often too. Make sure you're getting a clean red and you're not getting green in the inside. Alright, so here with these buds are still relatively close, I'm just going to use the shape of the brush here and do a quick little stroke upwards. If it's too wet, you could fine tune it. And I could mix in a little bit of brown and go back and fine tune the details here. But yeah, you can see how just a few quick simple brushes can give that illusion of a rosebud. And really, that's what's all about. It's not about, you know, when you're drawing flowers, it's not like a technical drawing, so you don't need to always go through and draw every little detail unless that's the way you prefer to draw things. You know, you could just give the impression of something there. Okay, let me draw one more that's different. I'm gonna draw a sunflower here, because the sunflower is it's a little tricky. It has this dark center and then these bright yellow leaves, so it goes into that issue again, like how do you paint a lighter color over a darker color. So I'm going to start with the middle here. I'm going to start with the darkest part. Maybe not the brightest idea, but I'm going to do it anyway. So this part's kind of like a donut shape. A tortoise. Okay, here we go. Let's go dip in the middle here. So I'm going to go add a little bit of black. Too much. I should rotate my paper again. Again, the darkest part is right in the center here, and it's going to lighten up as it comes out. So that's why I want the tip of my brush to be pointing inwards. And I want to give it a little bit of texture, so I'm going to dab it to give it that texture. Okay, now I'm going to clean off the brush really well, because we have a really dark color, and now I'm going to go back to a light color. Trying to find the right color here. Okay, so that's giving me a nice bright yellow. Now in order for me to be able to paint over this, we want to make sure it's completely dry, and your brush has to be fairly dry and have a lot of color. So a lot of pigment, not a lot of water. And even then it's still, you can kind of tell it's not really going over it. And again, with this one I'm gonna be more loose than the rose, because I'm just gonna go in here and do brush strokes out. Depending on the type of flower, you know, you could just do this. Last time I did the various petals. When you're painting, you could just make a circle out of it and then brush out or brush in. You know, if you start your brush strokes from the outside in, you'll get a different effect too. I want the petals to actually go over it a little bit. To go over the center part. So I'm putting on a heavy amount of pigments on the brush. And you can see I can draw over it a little bit. You know, and part of it is mixing, and that's okay too, because you know I do want these petals to have a little bit extra color too. It's not going to be solid yellow. It will have a little bit of brown, and in fact I'm going to go back and add a little bit of orange as well. Yeah, so if it smears the brown a little bit, that's okay with me. Yeah, because you know when you look at things, especially in nature, it's never going to be perfect shapes. There's always going to be little jaggedy parts that go in and out. Okay, so and then you know this usually a sunflower has layers and layers of petals. So I could go through and draw a whole bunch, but I think you get the idea. And also, like I said, I was going to add a little bit of orange. Where's my orange? Okay. Here's the orange. Right now I'm going from a lighter color to a darker color, so I'm not too concerned about cleaning it up. But yeah, I want to give it a little bit of orange. Just makes things stand out a little bit more. Probably too much there. I know this is probably more some people's style when it comes to painting. They just want to lay down brush strokes and not really think about it. And you know, flowers are kind of good for that, because you can just, you know, be organic about it, and as long as it gives off the impression that it's a sunflower, you know, you don't have to worry about every leaf falling perfectly in place. That's close enough. I'm gonna go back and add the stem. So I'm gonna go back to the green. And okay, so let's see, right around here. Sunflowers tend to have a bigger stem than the rose, I believe. I don't know that much about flowers, so just some observations from at least pictures I've seen. One thing I mentioned last time when it comes to drawing flowers, it's good to offset where these leaves come out. You know, very rarely do they come out right next to each other, but sometimes people draw them that way. So make sure that they're slightly offset. And again, you know, when it comes to leaves and stems, let's give it a little bit of depth by adding shadows to one side. You know, maybe right along here. Oh, one other really important thing. Okay, I'm going to clean my brush one more time. The other thing is too, you don't always just have to use your brush like a pen and you know, outline every little stroke that you have. You know, be a little bit creative. I want to show you one other thing. There's usually little specks right in the middle of the sunflower. So what I'm going to do is I'm basically getting a huge amount of white, loading up my brush with a lot of white, and you know, I'm going to basically spatter a bit of paint on there and just use my fingertips and spatter. There, I don't know if you can see it. Let's see if I get it a little bit closer here. You can see, it's hard to focus on it. maybe I'll provide a better picture later, but focus. There we go. You see it, you know, when I pull the brush back, you see it creates a little bit of spatter. And that's good for creating those little bit of texture. Anyway, I think this is pretty much it. You know, if I were to seriously work on this, I would probably put in a lot more time and go through and edit all the little details. But I think you get the idea. It shows you some of the techniques you could cover. You could mask things off to get white clouds, or to get some lines, or you could purposely leave little bits of it blank. Or you could use the lighter color but not fill it with a lot of water, but really load the brush up with a lot of pigment, and then you could go over some of the darker colors. So that is it for today. Oops, it's gotten really dark in here. Don't think there's much I can do about the light. So that's it for this week. If there's anything else you would be interested in drawing, please let me know in the comments. I am a freelance illustrator. I'm available for hire. You can also see my website to see some of the work that I've done. And yeah, keep watching and keep painting, keep drawing. That's the show, and see you next time.